Hi, thank you for joining me in the Louie file. We are in part 3, I think it is, of the Apostle Paul's mission. We've been looking in Acts chapter 9, the first couple of videos, looking and seeing how the Apostle Paul became to be who he is and how Jesus called him to be his spokesperson, his instrument, his vessel, his chosen vessel is what it says in Acts chapter 9. Today we're going to start and we're going to look in Galatians. I found it kind of curious. I mean, I love to study the Bible, but it just kind of came all together in my mind in just a flash about how many times the Apostle Paul shares his testimony or part of his testimony in his letters that he wrote to the churches. So I was going to touch on these. I would hope that you would go and read them in a grander, bigger context for your the fuller picture of this. But I'm gonna look in Galatians 1:13 through 17 for right now. I'm just going to read these verses. Galatians 1:13 through 17. He says, "For you have heard of my former manner of life in Judaism, how I used to persecute the church of God beyond measure and tried to destroy it. And I was advancing in Judaism beyond many of my contemporaries among my countrymen, being more extremely zealous for my ancestral traditions. But when God, who had set me apart even from my mother's womb and called me through his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son in me so that I might preach him among the Gentiles, I did not immediately consult with flesh and blood. Nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me, but I went away to Arabia and returned once more to Damascus." Wow. So, if you watch the first couple videos, you see that he was on his way to Damascus to lock up and persecute followers of the way, the disciples of Jesus Christ. So here he's sort of recounting that. It's his testimony. I mean, you're going to obviously find some similarities here, but I think it's fascinating how we see a little more in each one of these retellings. So he's saying that you've heard about how I was into Judaism, and I persecuted the church of God. I was trying to destroy it. I mean, the Apostle Paul thought that his mission from God was to shut down this Christian thing, this followers of Jesus, these followers of the way. So he was adamant about it. That's one thing you can say. He was very zealous, as the Bible uses that term. And I think sometimes God looks at us and he goes, you know what? If you were half as zealous, half as determined about who I really am and what I'm really about, you could be unstoppable. So he turned the Apostle Paul around. He turned him around in his tracks on the road to Damascus. It says he was advancing in Judaism. He was the man. He was more zealous for his ancestral traditions. He knew his family heritage and how awesome it was. He was a Hebrew of Hebrews, is what it says in Philippians. Excuse me, got a little itchy eye here. So he said, on paper, I was the man. And he said, but when God had set me apart even from my mother's womb, called me through his grace, and was pleased to reveal his Son in me. Oh, that's what it's all about, isn't it? See, the Apostle Paul was following laws. He knew what Moses had said. He understood his heritage. He understood the promises that God gave to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. But he didn't quite see them the way they really were. The New Testament, the New Covenant, is all about Jesus Christ, the one and only unique Son of God, being the fulfillment to those promises that God gave Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and Israel down through the ages. It was fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ. He is the seed of Abraham. And in Galatians later on, the Apostle Paul makes it very clear that God wasn't giving a promise to seeds, but to the seed, which is Jesus Christ. See, the Apostle Paul was a Hebrew, and the Hebrew people had, I think over the years, become very arrogant and also blind, because they thought that since they could trace their heritage back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that they were in, that everything was good between them and God. So when you look at the Gospels and Jesus is telling Nicodemus, you must be born again, and he's saying that unless God himself draws you, you can't come. that all is like a head scratcher to the Jewish people. They're thinking, what do you mean come? I'm already in. Born again? I'm born right the first time. I'm Hebrew, man. What are you talking about? See, it was a puzzling thing to them. So the Apostle Paul thought he was in because of his heritage and his religious views and his advancing in Judaism. He thought that was the way that you get yourself in close and in right relation with God. But he's telling us here that it's really through God himself revealing his Son in us. That's how we come to be in union and oneness with this God that we're talking about. See, that's a radical shift in thinking. It's not about obedience to outward laws. It's not about the fact that we can trace our heritage back to Abraham. It's not about that at all. And that's how the Apostle Paul became the apostle to the Gentiles, because he saw that it was about all people. It was about all mankind being born of God's Spirit and having God's Son, Christ, revealed in them. That's what being a Christian is. And he said, I didn't go and consult with flesh and blood, and I didn't go to Jerusalem. He said, I didn't go looking for somebody to make it okay, because I knew that the Son had been born and birthed in me, and that's what it was all about. Revelation, understanding of who Christ in me really is. Whoa, that's how you become a son of God, is by receiving Christ and by him being birthed in you, revealed in you. See, now he can go, when that happened, now he can go and accomplish what God had called him to do, because the reality sets in that it's really Christ in him doing what it is that God the Father has said to do. See, we learn to rest and let him do through and as us. Christ in us, the hope of glory, will move us from within to do what God has told us to do. Fascinating. So God set Paul apart and called him through his grace and revealed his Son in him. And that is what it's all about. So now he can go and be that witness to the Gentiles and the Jews and the kings and everything that Jesus talked about in Acts chapter 9. Wow. All right, so we're going to move on into the next installment, the Apostle Paul's mission, and we're going to be in Philippians chapter 3, if you want to be prepared before you click that one. But I would hope that you would continue with me on this journey through the Scriptures and Paul's mission, because we're going to go somewhere, we're going to get to a point, but I want to lay all this foundational stuff out first. So I thank you for watching, and I pray that this is helping you, and I'll see you on the next Louie File.